Well, hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's great to be with you on this Tuesday, April 26th. And here's some of what we're talking about tonight. Russia raises the specter of nuclear war. This isn't the first time the Kremlin has used this rhetoric, but how should we interpret things this time around? Elon Musk says buying Twitter is a matter of protecting free speech. Well, if so, then what parts of the app will he tighten the rules on, and where might he loosen up? Some governments may have a lot to say about that. We'll explain. Plus, Harvard is confronting a painful part of its legacy, how slavery helped build the university. More on a new study and the millions that Harvard will spend to address that legacy. And the best-selling vehicle in America is going electric. Today, Ford unveiled the new F-150. What's the market like for a new kind of pickup truck?
Mr. President!
This sucker's quick.
How's it drive?
So we've mentioned that Russia has been ratcheting up its attacks in Ukraine, but that's not just on the ground. Its rhetoric might get the attention of anyone who's worried about World War III. Last night, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, spoke on state television. He claimed that the risk of nuclear war is, in his words, serious and real. He added that it should not be, again, these are his words, underestimated. Minister Lavrov also accused NATO of essentially engaging in a proxy war by supplying weapons to Ukraine. His talk of nuclear conflict comes 2 days after strong words from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. The secretary said that the U.S. would like to see Moscow weakened. Mr. Austin was in Germany today alongside officials from 40 countries that are giving Ukraine long-term support. He was asked if Russia might use some kind of nuclear weapon in Ukraine.
That kind of rhetoric is very dangerous and unhelpful. Nobody wants to see a nuclear war happen.
While Secretary Austin was in Germany, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was on Capitol Hill in Washington. He told members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that Russia has failed in Ukraine.
On the terms that President Putin himself set, Ukraine has already succeeded and Russia has failed. The terms that Putin set was to eliminate the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine and to subsume it back into Russia. I can state with confidence that that has failed and that will fail. I do not see a scenario by which that happens.
Meanwhile, things remain dire in the southern port city of Mariupol. One Ukrainian battalion is still holding out at a steel plant there. It's preventing Russia from claiming total victory over the city, at least for now. NBC's Cal Perry starts us off tonight from Kyiv. And Cal, I wonder how Ukraine is responding to Moscow's latest rhetoric. I'm not sure whether they take Minister Lavrov's words seriously or not.
Well, I think the main response came from the foreign minister, and he sort of put on a brave face, saying that this is more of the same from what Ukraine has heard from Russia and from what the world is hearing from Russia, and that this is Russia holding the world basically hostage and not paying much attention to it, talking about the offensive gains that Ukraine has made, basically saying that was the reaction from Russia. The bottom line, however, though, for people here, it is very scary, and we've heard scary things throughout this war. We've heard the threat of chemical weapons. We had the fighting at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the biggest nuclear power plant in all of Europe. That fighting, you may remember, about a month ago, we heard from the government saying there could have been a meltdown. And then you had the situation in Chernobyl. So it's been one terrifying thing after another for a population here that is not only still feeling the effects of this war, but that is still fighting this war. 7.7 million people internally displaced. So many of those folks have nowhere to stay, don't have shelter over their head, and then are now sort of confronted by the news that there could be, according to the Russians, really the outbreak of World War III, Joshua.
Yeah, the nuclear rhetoric, especially in Ukraine, which has 4 nuclear plants with a total of 15 reactors, 6 reactors at Zaporizhzhia, any of which could have caught fire in that firefight, but mercifully did not. Meanwhile, you had the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres speaking in Moscow to Vladimir Putin. Did anything come of that?
So we heard some news about Mariupol, that there could be international aid organizations allowed in. But again, this is another one of those instances where nobody believes what Vladimir Putin is saying. He said last week that he had instructed the armed forces in Russia not to fire on that steel plant. And then today, we understand, according to Ukrainian officials, it was shelled more than 35 times. On top of that, Ukrainian officials say that the abductions, what they call forced abductions, continue from that city. 474 people, they say, were taken out of the city and forced to move to Russia. This is video now of that infamous long table with the Russian president meeting with the UN Secretary General. And look, you know, in the press conference we had here, Joshua, on Saturday night, and you and I spoke about this, the Ukrainian president was asked repeatedly, what kind of role does the United Nations have to play here? And it's a fair question because on the one side you have Vladimir Putin, whom, at least as far as the Ukrainians are concerned in the West, cannot be trusted. And then on the other side of that, you have America and American diplomats leading an effort to rally their allies to not only equip Ukraine faster, but to bring more lethal aid here into Ukraine, which again, as I said, sort of raises the question, well, then what is the role that the UN has to play? I mean, for so many generations, America has been one of those countries that will come out and call for calm on both sides and call for a de-escalation in any conflicts, and we just haven't had that. This is a different conflict. The nature of it is different. America feels ethically it's on the right side of this conflict. It's on the side of a fledgling democracy, and Russia is something very different. It doesn't change the reality on the ground here, though, that not many people are calling for a ceasefire, and it's all the more complicated, I think, for the Ukrainians because they're making battlefield gains. And so while the Russians are lashing out with these airstrikes, it makes it difficult, especially for the Ukrainian president, to enforce any kind of cessation of violence, Joshua.
So we see there on the map some of the latest Russian attacks and troop locations. As we noted, there's Crimea down at the bottom. The Black Sea is the large body of water. The smaller one is the Sea of Azov. There you see the city of Mariupol, which we had been talking about, where that one last Ukrainian battalion is holding out. I wonder, with regard to all of this, we've heard from the U.S., from Russia, we've heard from NATO, now the UN has weighed in. What about the Ukrainian people themselves on the ground? What are you hearing from them?
Well, I think the Ukrainian people are shell-shocked. As I said, 7.7 million people are displaced. They're being faced with this reality. The United Nations says that some 15% of them are on the move trying to make their way back home. So many people, though, are returning to nothing. We spent the day in the suburb of Irpin. It's a suburb of Kyiv here, and it was one of the places where the Russians were stopped, where they couldn't get any further. It was sort of the gates of the city, and that's where they were turned away. And we had the chance to spend some time with Olena. She's a 59-year-old who returned to her home today. We followed her there and asked her to share a little bit of her story with us. Take a listen, Joshua. Here's some of that story.
When they were shelling us, there was such a feeling that they are preparing a base area, and just how to say, honestly, there was nowhere to hide, and I asked God to kill me straight away.
The statistics are stunning. 1 in 6 Ukrainians has been displaced, and the displacement continues. It only grows. 600,000 people displaced just this month alone. And again, with the heavy fighting in the east, we're still seeing people who are fleeing these areas. This is some of the drone footage that we took today in Irpin. You come across these neighborhoods, Joshua, entire neighborhoods that have just been disappeared. And again, there's just nowhere to put people. There's just some people who are still sleeping outside with nowhere to go.
She said, I asked God to kill me straight away. My goodness. Thank you, Cal. That's NBC's Cal Perry reporting for us live in Kyiv. Now, we told you that Russia has some people worried about the prospect of nuclear conflict. Well, a survey this month found that 70% of Americans say they are worried about a nuclear attack. Now, Russia's defense minister is warning of what he called a serious and real danger of nuclear war. But is he bluffing? I mean, will Russia use its nuclear rhetoric as a deterrent to the West? Is there a real chance of the unthinkable happening? Let's continue now with Bill Taylor, a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Currently, he is a vice president at the U.S. Institute of Peace's Russia and Europe division. Ambassador, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Joshua. Good to be here.
I'm not sure what to make of Russia, but I'm not sure I want to find out how serious they are with these nuclear threats. It's like you corner an animal after a while, you never know how hard it's going to fight when its back is to the wall. But what do you make of these nuclear threats from Russia?
Joshua, as you've pointed out, this is not the first time that we've heard this kind of nuclear saber rattling from the Russians. It seems that when things don't go very well with them, when things are going against them for one reason or another, for example, right now, as the NATO allies are providing weapons for the Ukrainians to be able to defend themselves against this unprovoked attack by the Russians, and that has led to another of these rattling of the nuclear saber. We've heard before when things didn't go so well. They think the Russians must think we have to be reminded that they have nuclear weapons. We don't need to be reminded. We understand this. Bill Burns, Joshua, you'll remember last week, the head of the CIA says that we take that threat very seriously. We watch very closely to see if there's any indication that these threats will translate into operations, any increased readiness, anything that indicates that they might actually be readying their nuclear weapons for use. So far, not. So far, not. He's doing the right thing of being very careful about that. We should be too. But what we need to do is have the Ukrainians win. And the Ukrainians are prepared to win. They're prepared to fight to the end, and we're prepared to support them as they make that fight.
Let me get your reaction to something that Republican Senator Mitt Romney of Utah said today. As we noted, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was speaking before a Senate committee today. There is an array of meetings happening now on Capitol Hill in terms of the budgets from each of the cabinet agencies, including the Department of State. Here's part of what Senator Romney said during today's hearing. Watch.
Overall, it has been a success so far, and want to compliment you on that. I think it was unfortunate that one of the headlines that came back from your trip was that our purpose was to diminish the Russian military capacity. That may be a byproduct, but our mission there is to help the people of Ukraine have freedom and sovereignty, which they richly deserve.
Now, I think he's referring to the comments that the defense secretary made, Lloyd Austin, when he said that it is the United States' desire to see Moscow weakened. And frankly, I feel like that feeds the rhetoric from Moscow that this is a proxy war, that this is about something bigger than simply the conflict in Ukraine, but this is one big country's way of attacking another big country without getting its hair mussed. What do you think?
I think that Secretary Blinken had it right. And indeed, Secretary Austin had it right. I mean, both of them have made the point, and they were making this point. Secretary Austin, I think, was making this point that we need the Ukrainians to succeed. To succeed, they need to defeat the Russians. And he said that later on. We need to defeat the Russians. The Ukrainians are the way to that defeat. We need to support the Ukrainians as they stop the Russians. Joshua, if the Russians are allowed to succeed in Ukraine, then next will be, we know there will be a next will be Poland or Latvia or Lithuania. So this is the strategy, this is a strategic picture that Secretary Austin was describing. That is, he wants to be sure that the Russians are stopped. And the way to stop the Russians is to support the Ukrainians, to provide the Ukrainians all the weapons that they need. And that's what he's in Germany doing right now.
And we do know that there is already an effort to try to whip up some pro-Russian sentiment in Moldova, which is just west of Ukraine, kind of south of Poland, west of Ukraine. Can I ask you about Antonio Guterres' visit to Moscow to speak to Vladimir Putin, the Secretary General of the UN? We were talking to Cal a second ago in terms of what Moscow is saying and the U.S. is saying and NATO is saying and Ukraine is saying, and there aren't a whole lot of people who seem to be talking about peace in the middle of all this, except maybe Secretary General Guterres in the middle of all of this. Does this mean that the international community is sort of past the prospect for peace, or does that still look like a possibility without this war getting dramatically worse in the process?
Joshua, it may get dramatically worse for the Russians. And if it does, then there could well be the negotiations that we've all been looking for. If Mr. Putin realizes, once Mr. Putin realizes that he's not winning on the battlefield, and you've been describing how he's lost around Kyiv. You've described how his flagship in the Black Sea was sunk. You've been describing how 8 or 9 general officers, Russian general officers, have been killed on the battlefield. It's not going well for them. Their troops are not fresh. Their troops are beaten up. They're short of troops, and they're looking for troops from Syria, Libya, private sector. The Belarusians won't. They have big problems. Once President Putin realizes that, that's the time when negotiations can be serious. He will then say, "Okay, let's have this conversation." At that time, there could be the conversation that we're talking about. But until then, the Ukrainians have been willing to sit down, but the Russians have not, and so they have not been willing to have this conversation.
Last quick question, Ambassador. I don't know any other more diplomatic way to ask this question, but it keeps coming up from our viewers, just in conversation with other people that I know with regard to Russia and nukes. For lack of a more diplomatic way to ask it, do you think Vladimir Putin is crazy enough to actually do something like that?
Joshua, I don't. I don't think he is that crazy. I don't think he's suicidal. He knows, he understands that if he were to use nuclear weapons, in particular against a NATO ally, it's the end of Russia. He understands that. He's not suicidal, in my view, Joshua.
If there is one thing that we know Vladimir Putin is very hot on, it's preserving the legacy of Russia and seeing it restored to what he views as its former strength. So I do hear you on that. I certainly hope that you're correct. Ambassador Bill Taylor, good to have you back on the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua. Good to be here.
And please do keep sending us your questions about the war in Ukraine. Every day brings us more to talk about, and we very much appreciate talking about it with you. So leave us a voicemail, 888-575-2NBC. That's 888-575-2622. Please keep them as brief as you can. You can also email us nowtonight@nbcnews.com. We are also at NBC Now Tonight on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We would love to hear from you. Still to come, speaking of Twitter, what will free speech look like there? It's just one question raised by Elon Musk's planned buyout. We'll hear what some of you had to say about it. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. Twitter is a platform for conversation, and tonight the platform is the conversation. Specifically, what free expression will look like there under its new owner. Yesterday, the company announced that it accepted Elon Musk's buyout offer. Last night, Twitter's co-founder Jack Dorsey said he endorsed that move. He says taking Twitter private is the right step. Mr. Dorsey tweeted, quote, "Elon is the singular solution I trust. I trust his mission to extend the light of consciousness. Elon's goal of creating a platform that is maximally trusted and broadly inclusive is the right one," unquote. So what exactly does broadly inclusive mean to Elon Musk? How does he plan to maximize its trust? Free speech means different things to different people. And a lot of you had thoughts on how it's going on Twitter now and how it might go after the buyout. Dale tweeted, "Great place for it. It's the quickest access to information and gives the public the ability to express themselves to the rich, famous, and connected. It's an incredibly important tool for ordinary people." Alan tweeted, "I never would think to purchase free speech for $44 billion. That said, I've been educated and informed by Twitter. A lot of it had to do with people feeling free to express their opinions. My problem with Twitter? False advertising, not people feeling free to make false statements." And Eat the Rich tweeted, "As a woman, it is not a safe space." Joining us now is Jeffrey Rosen, a professor at the George Washington University Law School and the president and CEO of the National Constitution Center. Professor Rosen, welcome back.
Great to be back.
First of all, can we just be clear? I don't have a clear idea of what we mean by free speech. It's one thing for me as an American who grew up in a First Amendment system to say what free speech means to me, but I think we have to broaden our aperture on that for wherever people are watching around the world. Whatever you think free speech is, there's someone with the complete opposite view of it, and the idea is for Twitter to make space where you can both coexist. Do I have that right?
Well, you absolutely do have it right that free speech means many different things to different people around the world. But Elon Musk was pretty specific in a tweet today, actually. At 3:43 p.m., he tweeted, free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy. By free speech, I simply mean that which matches the law. I'm against censorship that goes beyond the law. Now, of course, Twitter as a private company isn't bound by the First Amendment, but Elon Musk is saying he wants voluntarily to adopt the First Amendment standards. And when it comes to that, there actually is a really specific definition of free speech that the Supreme Court has recognized. So just to get specific, right now, Twitter bans incitement that could lead to violence. The First Amendment says the speech has to be intended to and likely to lead to violence. So that would allow much more speech on Twitter. Two other categories which would change a lot if Elon Musk actually does adopt First Amendment standards are misinformation. Under First Amendment law, you have to prove something was false. But on Twitter right now, if it lacks context, you could take it down. So there would be much more falsehood that would be allowed. And then finally, hate speech is protected by the First Amendment. Racist and sexist speech is protected under First Amendment standards. It's banned on Twitter now, and it would be allowed under the new Elon Musk standards.
I want to reiterate something that you just said, and I've mentioned this on air before. In my previous job at NPR, you were my very first guest on my very first show, and my very first question was, what is one thing people think they know about the First Amendment, but they really don't? And you gave the answer that you just said, which is that the First Amendment does not govern social media, right?
Yes, Joshua, I remember that so well. It was such a meaningful conversation from the beginning of that great show. And here we are back to first principles. It's really important just to remind ourselves as Americans, it's counterintuitive. You think, hey, Elon Musk now has more power over free speech than any Supreme Court justice or king or president. But he's not forced to obey the First Amendment because the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. It doesn't say Elon Musk shall make no law. So it's a very big deal when the leader of one of the major platforms says, even though I don't have to do this, I think the First Amendment has the correct standards in a functioning democracy, and I'm going to voluntarily adopt them.
With regard to some of the politics behind this, there's been a lot said among conservatives and Republicans about the future of Twitter. We know that former President Trump was kicked off of Twitter for a number of his posts. Talk about the political aspect of this and how this might all factor in. Again, with the understanding that the politics in the U.S. are very different than the politics in Europe, which are different than the politics in parts of South Asia, which are different than the politics of Africa. And that's also going to be another set of competing imperatives to deal with, I think.
Absolutely. The politics are different among countries. And of course, the politics change here. So at the moment, Democrats are unhappy about Elon Musk adopting First Amendment standards, and Republicans like it because Elon Musk has suggested he doesn't like permanent bans of public figures. He prefers temporary timeouts. So he might allow Donald Trump back on Twitter. And today, again, he tweeted at 5:56, suspending the Twitter account of a major news organization for publishing a truthful story was obviously incredibly inappropriate, referring to Twitter's decision to suspend the New York Post for tweeting articles about Hunter Biden. So just at the moment, Republicans think, hey, this is going to mean more pro-Trump speech. But we've got to take a longer view. During the next presidential campaign, a more First Amendment friendly standard might well help Democrats, not Republicans. The broader context, though, as you began by saying, Joshua, is Democrats at the moment are more eager to have the platforms monitor hate speech, for example, racist and sexist speech. Republicans maybe less so, although it's not a totally politicized thing. There are civil libertarian liberals who also, are applauding what Elon Musk is doing. So broadly, I hope listeners will evaluate this more in terms of whether you think it's a good idea to adopt First Amendment standards for the platforms, not which party is it going to help at this particular moment.
And you see some of the comments from members of Congress. Senator Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee, calling it an encouraging day for freedom of speech. Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, quoting Baymax from Big Hero 6, saying, I've got some concerns. So there's a variety of different responses to this. Before I have to let you go, part of the conversation today, at least online, and among some of the voicemails we got from viewers, began to lapse, and some of what I've heard from a variety of commentators, began to lapse into the impact of billionaires owning media companies. A number of people brought up Jeff Bezos in the Washington Post, for example. A very wealthy person owns Comcast, which owns NBC Universal, which owns this channel. But I feel like those are two slightly different conversations. It's one thing if Elon Musk was to buy the NBC television network, right? It's a pervasive over-the-air broadcaster that is regulated by the Federal Communications Act. It's another thing if he's buying a social media platform where you don't stumble over accounts. You have to know the name of the account and type it in before you can get it. So I feel like the concern is the same, right, about gatekeeping and about keeping out the voices of everyday people. You heard that in one of our comments. But these feel like apples and oranges. They're not quite the same issue. Or is there something I'm missing?
No, of course, you're absolutely right. There are different concerns about the impact of money on politics, of billionaires owning media companies, and the impact of billionaires owning TV networks. But the one thing is the same, though, is the concern about unchecked power, about private citizens, whether it's a billionaire or a group of stockholders, making fundamental decisions about what kind of content people can see online without regulation. And as you said, networks are regulated to some degree, broadcast networks, social media networks less so. And that's why this debate about a social media network voluntarily choosing to adopt First Amendment standards is such a big deal. You might have a billionaire who preferred only speech that favored his or her business interests. So I think it's this is a principled debate. There are good arguments on both sides, but let's get past the fact that it's one particular billionaire who's adopting these First Amendment standards and say, for the first time since you and I started having this conversation and since the social network companies launched, we have the head of one of them who's actually saying, I think the First Amendment standard is the right standard and I'm going to apply it.
GW Law Professor Jeffrey Rosen, also of the National Constitution Center. Always good to see you, sir. Thank you very much.
Great to see you, too.
So much to discuss with this, and I love hearing your questions and your thoughts on this. So we're going to pick up this conversation on Twitter this Friday. Not on Twitter, on this show, about Twitter. You know what I'm saying. Our experts are going to answer your questions here on this show, not on Twitter, here on NBC News Now, about all things related to this buyout, including some of the free speech questions. You're raising really good questions, so keep sending them our way. We also welcome more of your stories of how Twitter is or is not working for you as a venue for free speech. You can reach us at NBC Now Tonight on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram. Leave us a voicemail, 888-575-2NBC, or email us nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Up next, Harvard is telling perhaps the most shameful story in its history. A new initiative lays out how slavery helped build America's oldest university. How will it use this painful past to build a better future? That's just ahead. Stay close. America's oldest university is confronting one of its darkest legacies. Harvard just completed a deep dive into its past, and it discovered some painful truths and announced plans to address them. The report is called Harvard and the Legacy of Slavery. It looks at the school's deep connections to wealth generated from slave labor. This report shows that Harvard's faculty and staff enslaved more than 70 people during the 17th and 18th centuries while slavery was legal in Massachusetts. Harvard says it will now spend $100 million to address its ties to slavery. Based on the report's findings, those ties run very, very deep. The university says it was directly invested in sugar and rum industries in the Caribbean, as well as cotton and railroads in the U.S. In the first half of the 1800s, slavery profiteers accounted for more than a third of Harvard's private donations. In other words, Harvard's ties to enslavement helped fund its rise to prominence. Now, other prestigious universities have made similar findings, including Brown and Georgetown. And more than 80 schools have joined a consortium called Universities Studying Slavery. So what's behind this wider movement, and why now? Joining us to discuss it now is Katie Mangan, a senior writer for the Chronicle of Higher Education. Ms. Mangan, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
What have some of the early reactions been like to Harvard's report?
Well, it was a truly remarkable report that came out today when President Lawrence Bacot released this statement and also a 130-page report outlining how the university has not only had historical ties to slavery, but been complicit and perpetuating what he called profoundly immoral practices. These are very, very strong words coming from Harvard and long overdue, a lot of people would say. Harvard certainly is not the first university to grapple with its ties to slavery, but this is certainly one of the most extensive and really powerful reports that we've seen.
We heard in this report that a benefactor of the law school enslaved a woman named Cuba, and one of that woman's ancestors spoke today about the study. Here's part of what they said.
Certainly it was elation at first in terms of just understanding, wow, our family was connected, to this whole story. But then, after settling back, it's an emotional trip. When I read, certainly some of the hardships that they went through, how cruel they were treated, even though they were up north and not down south. Slavery is slavery, and the type of cruelty that they experienced, not as harsh, I'm sure, as working in the fields of Alabama and Mississippi, but working on Brattle Street in Cambridge, had its very difficult times.
That's so powerful for him to be able to point to an ancestor and know that piece of his study. But beyond the personal impact on the descendants of these slaves, what impact is this report meant to have? I mean, it would be real easy for something like this to be done, make everyone feel good, and then that's the end of it.
The report came out with some very specific recommendations of what they wanted to see the university done, and the final recommendation was to hold Harvard accountable, to have regular reports and analyses to make sure that Harvard is doing what it says it's going to do. And at this point, they're not talking so much about direct payments to the descendants of enslaved people, but more a matter of researching and trying to locate as many people as possible to try to bring more stories like the ones that we just heard to light so that this becomes a more concrete and more tangible issue when you're dealing with real people, real stories. That's one of the things that we're seeing other universities do, is to spend a lot of time trying to track down these descendants, hear their stories, and get them involved in the steps moving forward that Harvard has pledged to take using this very, very sizable amount of money.
Yeah, if we could back up to that list we were just showing in terms of what Harvard plans to do with the $100 million that it has committed to this project, including establishing a legacy of slavery fund, creating memorializations and curricula around enslaved people, developing partnerships with historically black colleges and universities, and also connecting to Native communities. I learned from this report that Harvard's charter said it was supposed to educate white and Indian residents of the colonies, but only one person of tribal descent received a degree in Harvard's earlier days. Is there a timeline for the use of this money, or are there any kind of guardrails on where this money goes, or is that still being figured out?
As far as I can tell, that's still being figured out, but they are going to move ahead with these steps. This $100 million that has been dedicated, that some of it's going to be freed up immediately to take some initial steps, and some of it will be used later on. But a lot of the talk really is about scholarship and teaching, teaching more classes, more teacher training, reaching out more to historically black colleges and universities, and trying to strengthen those ties with exchange programs to bring more faculty members and students to Harvard, really just trying to study the matter and know exactly where they stand before they get down to the details about specifically how the money is going to be used, more in terms of the reparations that people are really eager to see.
I should note, by the way, that NBC News did reach out to Harvard University and asked if someone could be made available for tonight's broadcast. The university declined, but that invitation stands. Before I have to let you go, I wonder where this sits in the middle of all these other efforts to try to address the legacy of slavery in higher education. We put on the screen some of what Brown and Georgetown have done. There have been a number of efforts to deal with economic gaps. Students from disadvantaged backgrounds, Harvard and Stanford are two of the schools that have said, if you get admitted, we will come up with the money to let you in. You do not have to worry about paying for your education. How does this fit into all of the rest of those efforts to sort of close some of these racial gaps before we go?
I think it's a very important part in terms of trying to really come to terms with the legacy of discrimination and just to make very, very real why it is that colleges are taking all of these steps to try to plug equity gaps. These equity gaps are only growing and have grown more since COVID. And so I think it's just there's a new urgency right now to make sure that universities are not just paying lip service to these efforts to close equity gaps, but that they're really doing something about it. And I think the feeling is that bringing these stories to light and bringing these people to tell their stories is only going to help solidify the resolve of universities to take the steps that they're being called on to take to plug these long-standing and in fact widening equity gaps.
I should note, by the way, the report is online at legacyofslavery.harvard.edu. It is a remarkable piece of research. Legacyofslavery.harvard.edu. Catherine Mangan of the Chronicle of Higher Education, thank you for making time for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it. Bye.
We will get to some of today's other top stories in a moment, including Vice President Kamala Harris testing positive for COVID, the Supreme Court weighing the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico policy, and new plans to help prevent wildfires in the U.S. long before they can start. Let's begin your headlines tonight with President Biden. He's pushing to eliminate his predecessor's immigration policy at the U.S.-Mexico border. Today, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments on that. Here is an exchange between the Solicitor General of Texas and Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan. Texas is arguing to keep the so-called Remain in Mexico policy.
Nothing about this injunction actually requires negotiation with a foreign power, but in the extent that to some extent this court thought that it did, of course, the foreign affairs power is shared between Congress.
I'm sorry, I have to stop you there, General, and you can get the other 4 questions, but what do you mean it doesn't require negotiation with the foreign power? What are we supposed to do, just drive truckloads of people into Mexico and leave them without negotiating with Mexico?
That was part of today's oral arguments. Let's get more on the case from NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams.
President Trump called it the Migrant Protection Protocol, requiring immigrants from Central America seeking asylum to wait just outside the U.S. while their claims were considered. But opponents say it was anything but protection. More than 68,000 people were shuttled back to Mexico. Tent cities sprang up along the border. Human rights groups said hundreds of people were kidnapped and assaulted. In one of his first actions after taking office, President Biden shut it down, but Texas and Missouri sued. They said the program helped stem the surge at the border, and they said the government didn't follow the rules in shutting it down, so a judge ordered it started back up, and that's where it stands. Congress has never provided money for enough detention space at the border, so the issue at the Supreme Court today was, what can the government do? The states say that means asylum seekers must be returned to Mexico to wait. The Biden administration says thousands of immigrants can be allowed to wait inside the U.S., evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Some of the court's conservatives were skeptical about that. Justice Samuel Alito said that's probably no more rigorous than screening baseball fans entering Nationals Park. But several justices said the law allows the government to let immigrants wait inside the U.S. if doing so would provide a substantial public benefit. That's the legal term. And one of those benefits, the Biden administration says, is not having to make concessions to Mexico and getting it to agree to take the waiting asylum seekers. The lawyer for Texas told the court today that no negotiating was required. Justice Elena Kagan jumped in at that and said, what are we supposed to do? Just drive truckloads of people into Mexico and leave them without negotiating with Mexico? Despite the court's conservative majority, there were hints today that it might be willing to let President Biden shut Remain in Mexico down when it rules in late June. Joshua?
Thank you, Pete. That's NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams. Vice President Kamala Harris says she's feeling fine after testing positive for COVID. According to an advisor, her doctor prescribed her the antiviral pill Paxlovid. Her spokeswoman says the VP is experiencing no symptoms. Harris will isolate at home until she tests negative. The vice president has apparently not had close contact with President Biden in about a week. She had been traveling around California and returned to Washington, D.C. last night. This morning, she arrived at the White House for the president's daily briefing, and it was there that she tested positive. Today, Vice President Harris tweeted that she is vaccinated and boosted. Now to our series, The Climate Challenge, with a look at America's busy wildfire season. Lately, we've seen serious damage in New Mexico, Arizona, and Nebraska. The National Weather Service has parts of Arizona under a fire weather watch tomorrow. Now, the Biden administration has a new plan to help these areas before they ignite. Here's NBC's Miguel Almaguer.
Raging wildfires, fueled by acres of dense forest, propelled by unstoppable walls of flames. Obliterating homes and incinerating communities. It happens year.
Firefighters are beginning to lose the battle.
After year.
The air attack has been a major asset all day long. But
after year.
The winds fanning these flames are expected to last another 24 hours.
In 2021, Oregon's Bootleg fire tore through the Jacobs family property.
The fires have just got unreal big from what they was back in the past.
And when it's burning, can anything slow it down?
No.
The fifth-generation loggers and ranchers lost 300 acres.
It is quite a project.
Now the federal government is trying to help families like theirs, urging them to thin their own forests before fire season begins, or to initiate prescribed burns, controlled fires like this one, so there's less wood to fuel the flames when fire season starts. But conducting these burns isn't cheap or easy.
Who pays for that?
That's the thing right there. If we'd have managed our own property, done this thinning and stuff behind us, and then possibly had the state come in and do underburns and stuff like that, it would have saved our ground.
Across the U.S., there are 765 million acres of forest land. Extreme drought and climate change creating the most explosive conditions in the West. The government now wants to reduce fuel and clear as much land as the size of Idaho. To tackle that, last fall's infrastructure bill included billions set aside to fight wildfires before they start.
When you look out here and you see all these trees, do you see beauty or do you see danger?
Both. You know, I wish we could thin it all.
Here in Oregon, forest thinning can cost up to $900 an acre. Government grants help, but there's not enough money to go around.
The Jacobs family has applied for federal funding, but for now, they're covering their own bill. On a property this size, it's roughly $1 million, something they can't afford. But the cost of a catastrophic wildfire is even greater.
Just a few miles away from the Jacobs Ranch, the Dollingers' property was also burned by the Bootleg fire. But they're taking part in a 10-year program with Oregon's Department of Forestry. So a controlled burn in 2017 prevented what would likely have cost them their land.
We'd spent all those years trying to keep fire away, and here we invited it. You're going to burn, and you can have a choice. You want it controlled or do you want it uncontrolled? That is the reality.
Which is why they're investing in prevention, a price easier to pay before than after disaster strikes.
That was NBC's Miguel Almaguer reporting. Now, our changing climate is also pushing more people to give up their gas-guzzling ways. Well, today, America's best-selling vehicle went electric. We will check out the new Ford F-150 Lightning before we go. Last year, our cameras caught President Biden taking a joyride in Michigan. He took off in a new pickup truck that officially began production today.
I'm the head of Ford, I'm not in it.
Mr. President!
This sucker's quick.
Now, maybe you noticed, but we never heard the engine rev up in that video. Did you catch that? That's because it's an electric truck. And today, Ford put that truck on sale, the F-150 Lightning. This is Ford's first electric pickup, and a lot is riding on its success. The F-Series has been America's top-selling vehicle for 40 years. Now, it's not the first electric truck in the U.S. Tesla already makes one. But this new F-150 appears to be a hit with Ford consumers. Back in December, the company capped orders at around 200,000. It already has orders for all of them. And according to the New York Times, 2,000 of them could be delivered starting next week. Joining us now is Neil Beaudet. He has covered the auto industry for 2 decades, now as a reporter for the Times. Mr. Beaudet, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So suppose I'm a longtime Ford F-150 driver. I hate Chevys, and I love the F-150 just the way it is. You didn't need to change a thing. You had me at F-150. What is Ford doing to try to convince longtime legacy F-150 drivers, the ones who have gotten used to budgeting for gas, that it's time to go electric?
Well, they're not really emphasizing the idea that you won't have to pay for gas. One, they're pointing out that this is a 6,000-pound truck that'll go from 0 to 60 in about 4 seconds. So it feels like you're driving a sports car. And it can tow pretty heavy loads. And as you mentioned, there's no noise. It's a very smooth ride because it's an electric drive. So they're emphasizing that, but more, they're also pointing out this is like a giant power plant on wheels. So if you're a contractor, you can take it to a job site. You don't need to bring gasoline and a generator. You can plug in all your tools and run all day long off the truck. If you want to go camping, put a fridge in the back. If you want to go to a tailgate, you can set up a big screen TV, a stereo system, an electric grill. So there are many, many things you'll be able to do with this truck and the power in it that people don't even really think about today.
Can we just be clear? I just got a text from my mother just now. It was like, oh, somebody told your stepdad that he should look at the electric F-150. He ain't doing no drilling in the back of his truck. We don't cut down trees and build log cabins in F-150. A lot of the people who drive these are like accountants, or they wear one of these to work. It feels like Ford is using the same kind of marketing of like power, speed, toughness, vroom, to sell this F-150 the same way they sell the previous F-150s. They're kind of working around the green angle to sell them.
Well, this is an electric truck, but it's still an F-150. So you can do whatever you would normally do with your diesel-powered or V8 or V6 F-150, but it's electric drive, so you've got this other utility. The front of the truck does not have an engine. It has what they call a frunk. It's a front trunk. And there's a couple outlets in there, so you could store tools. You could put equipment in there. I was talking to Ford today. They had heard one customer who's got an electric scooter. They can plug into the front of the truck and carry it around there. And when they get to their destination and need assistance getting around, they can pull it out and their scooter is already charged up. So there's a lot you can do with this, plus the same thing that you normally do with an F-150.
I'm sorry, did you say that's called a frunk? Is that the word you used?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. A front trunk. In electric cars, there's no engine in the front. They turn it into a storage space. It's a trunk, but it's in the front.
A frunk. The inappropriate part of my brain is coming up with lots of jokes. So I'm just going to move on to my next question, which has to do with infrastructure. Rhonda writes, I like the idea of an electric car. I had a Toyota Prius hybrid. My issue is charging it. I live in a condo. I won't be able to charge it at my home. I'm not so sure my city or state is ready for a mass buying of electric cars yet. Rhonda, thank you for sharing that with us. I do wonder, Neil, where we stand in terms of having enough infrastructure to charge electric vehicles. I think Elon Musk and Tesla worked really hard to create charging stations so that you could drive cross country and have enough places to charge. But where do we stand beyond that?
Rhonda raises a very valid point. If you live in a condominium or an apartment, you're not going to have opportunities to charge at home. If you do have a home, you can get a charging station installed in your garage and charge overnight and get a full use of the battery the next day. So for people who live in homes where they've got a garage, single family home or what have you, they're in pretty good shape in terms of charging. If you're in an apartment and you want one of these, you're going to have to use a public charger. There are more and more popping around shopping centers around the country, but it's true, there are not enough. And if tens of thousands of these things sell in certain cities, it may be hard to find a charger that's available. We already see some of that sometimes Teslas, people go up to charge, and there are already 4 or 5 cars taken up in the chargers that are there.
And before I have to let you go, what do the future prospects look like for this? We know there's a dramatic shortage of semiconductors, and vehicles like this have to have computer chips in them. And also, GM's electric pickup has about 140,000 orders for that vehicle. So what's the future look like, briefly?
Well, I think there's no doubt that electric vehicles are going to take off. The question is just how fast, and you correctly hit on the semiconductor shortage. That's going to hold things back for a while, but eventually that'll be solved. It's improving. It's better than it was last year. And GM does have their own electric truck. It won't be out until next year. Chrysler with their Ram brand, they'll have a truck, won't be out till next year. So for the next 12 months, Ford pretty much has an open field for themselves.
Neil Beaudet of the New York Times, appreciate you making time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
By the way, breaking news, my mother says that my stepdad wants to tow an RV and a Harley. So now you know. Clearly, I touched a nerve. Hey, thanks for making time for us. Remember, we want your questions about Twitter and social media. Our experts are going to answer those on Friday. And we want your stories about free speech on Twitter. You can reach us at NBC Now Tonight on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram. Leave us a brief but brilliant voicemail, 888-575-2NBC, or email us nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.